Huddle Up Podcast is sponsored by Arena Eats. Log on to the website arenaeats.app, that's arenaeats.app, for the ultimate fan experience. At your favorite sports venue, Arena Eats mobile app, pre-order, express pickup, and in-seat delivery. How do you place your order? Continuing in the NFL, the quarterback carousel is continuing to turn, and really when we're talking about the biggest names on this, we're looking at Desean Watson, we're looking at Russell Wilson. I think a couple weeks ago, the first reports that there's potentially some unhappiness in Seattle with Russell Wilson, and the possibility that he's pretty much done, and the more that comes out on this, and I've heard interviews with kind of insiders with on Dan Patrick and things like that, that the feeling from a lot of people close to the NFL, regardless of what Seattle's saying, is that this situation with Russell Wilson in Seattle is pretty broken, and they would be actually very surprised if Russell Wilson is the quarterback in Seattle to start this upcoming season. Sean, we'll sit at because I know we've discussed the Desean Watson situation, but man, do you see Seattle resolving this? And if not, where do you think he will end up?
I think where we're at, I mean, we're far from the end of obviously, free agency just kind of getting rolling. But I mean, it seems pretty broken, but at the same time, there's a contract in place. And if Seattle doesn't have a contingency plan, they're not going to move him. I don't think they're in a position, because he's not in a position to play poorly. Do you run the risk of him sitting out? Maybe. I think players with how much they make off the field, like it's a situation we haven't really seen come to fruition yet, but players, especially a guy like Russell Wilson, has a ton of money that he makes outside of the playing field and outside of his team. So he's kind of one of those guys that could set a new standard. And if it's truly broken, if Seattle says, well, you're still with us, and he says, well, then I'm not going to play until you find somewhere to send me. I'm not saying I know that it's there, but it sounds like it's getting to a point where it could be, and he would be an interesting candidate to do that with the success he's had outside of playing quarterback. But I still, it's hard to see him playing anywhere else. If he were to move at this point, I think there's a couple interesting teams. I thought Dallas was obviously on his list. That's clearly out.
Right.
But a couple teams that were interesting. One is Chicago. I don't know how good Chicago is just by plugging in a Pro Bowl quarterback. Their offensive line isn't terrible, but it's not great either. You have an interesting play with a couple of decent running backs that are very different from each other. So you kind of have some excitement there. And if they could manage to get Allen Robinson under contract and back on the field, the receiving core is not terrible either.
No.
And obviously the defense is, good enough. They were right there despite the QB woes. So it would be an interesting play there. I could see that as one of my top ones. I also would not rule out the Las Vegas Raiders, because what's a big play there is John Gruden has complete control of all situations and movements. And I know John Gruden loves him some Russell Wilson. I know when John Gruden likes something and he wants it, he's going to find a way to get it. And if it means overpaying for it, which is probably what a team's going to have to do, and I think Chicago's also willing to overpay, that's the reason they're my two favorites. It's not necessarily the perfect plug-in. It's not necessarily where you would consider a Pro Bowl quarterback wanting to make a move, but they're both situations where you're going to be cherished and loved and given every opportunity to do whatever you want to do. And I know the Raiders are pretty much ready to move on with Derek Carr, as their fans have been for the last couple of seasons. So,
well, let's be honest too with the Raiders. If something doesn't change this year, they're probably going to be looking at moving on from John Gruden as well. because
right.
that
So if he wants to make one last push,
right.
this might be the time to sell future picks because they might not be yours anyway.
Exactly. And like the Chicago point, they lost out theoretically on the Carson Wentz deal because it was reported that they were going to try to make a play or even did make a play to Philadelphia for Carson Wentz. They lost out on that. And it's just if they want to change things around and they're not sold on Trubisky, then they have to make a choice. Dave, I know from talking to you off air, there's another team that Sean didn't bring up that whether it's 100% realistic or not, there's a team that you're kind of hoping that Russell Wilson gets moved to.
Yeah, I think Mr. Wilson's going to the Washington football team. I think he's going to see how good that defense is, and they're going to get some deal in place, whether it's with picks or even long-term picks. And, I mean, you have everything on that team, and you look at the Seattle team, and they were pretty good Super Bowl bound. It was that solid defense. And I don't know that there's I think you've got an opportunity. You slot a quarterback in there, and that Washington team wins 10 to 12 games this coming year, I think, with the talent and what they did last year and everything. And I think pretty much the entire core, and I'm using core in air quotes, of that team that was the key players that were around last year are around again this year. You have Riverboat Ron as the coach. You had a couple injuries. Guys will come back and be okay. But, you slot Russ in there, and that team is really freaking solid. And, I know just from talking to you earlier that that made you shiver and quiver with having that in your NFC East there, slotting Russ in. So that makes me like it even more.
Yeah, if there's a guy I don't want to see against my team twice, it's Russell Wilson, especially on a team that really is good, because when the Cowboys made the deal with Dak, the belief is, at least on paper, that it moves the Cowboys to the top of the NFC East right now as we sit, because Philly, you're in a situation really where you're where you're rebuilding. The Giants kind of are the Giants, and we don't know what Saquon Barkley is going to be like when he returns this year, and are we still totally sold on Daniel Jones? And my
prediction.
So it's one of these things where the NFC East really is kind of Washington and Dallas, and right now your quarterback in Washington is Taylor Heineke, and yeah, he was a fun story. The last game of the regular season, the first game of the playoffs, but you got to give the edge to Dallas there. But if they can move and get a quarterback, hell, whether it's Russell Wilson or Desean Watson's out there, if you can get somebody that's better than what you currently have, that's a team with a great defense, a great pass rush, good young receivers, good young running game, and a tremendous coach. I don't want Russell Wilson in Washington, but there has been some buzz there, and Ron Rivera wants a good quarterback, and a guy that's going to make it work. I mean, a serviceable quarterback, I think you can work with and be successful with what that Washington team is, but definitely
you just need a quarterback that can manage the game and not lose the game. You don't even need. I mean, you just need a quarterback that's not going to screw up what the defense has going for him. Look at that Broncos team when they beat the Panthers in the Super Bowl with Noodle Arm Manning that just didn't lose the game. That's all you need with that Washington D that's going to be very competitive for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. You just don't.
You fired Jake up. Jake's a Broncos fan. Whoa. Things are heating up.
I mean, here's the thing. I love Peyton Manning, but he wasn't the Peyton Manning of Indy when he was in Denver.
No,
he just wasn't. I mean, it's not.
Well, the first run at it, he had his first year in Denver, didn't he shatter records? I thought he was leading the league in touchdowns.
It was the touchdown record, but
right.
But he wasn't throwing 80-yard bombs. I mean, a lot of those were, slant passes, and I mean they had the talent at receiver
55. Jake knows.
to make it work. And I love Peyton Manning. I'm not making fun of Peyton Manning, but he wasn't the same guy as he was back then. But you had a defense that made it work.
Anybody else miss Peyton Manning?
I mean, you have to.
I just miss his presence around the game. We need him on broadcasts or something.
I mean, we've been watching the Peyton's Places on ESPN Plus.
Fantastic.
That is probably one of the best pieces of
it's perfect
of television I've ever seen. Like we're still working through season 1, so we have a whole season 2 still to go through.
Got a lot going on.
But if you haven't checked that out, you absolutely need to. But
do it.
So obviously we're going to watch Russell Wilson and where he goes, if he goes anywhere. Desean Watson reports coming out now that that if he doesn't get moved, and the Texans have kind of implied that they're not going to move him, and it's kind of the implication now that if he doesn't get moved, that he's willing to sit out games. So it looks like we may be in one of those stalemate situations. I think things will heat up maybe a little bit more with that situation around draft time, because Houston doesn't want to end up in a situation where their best player is sitting on the sideline or the press box and not playing. So ultimately, I do think he gets moved. But
Desean Watson in the 3rd pick for the 1st overall pick.
I mean,
if Jacksonville gets that call, even if Jacksonville would have to give up a pick in a later round, like we'll give you our 3rd pick and Desean Watson for your 1st overall pick and like a 3rd or 4th rounder. If you're Jacksonville, are you taking that?
I probably would.
Absolutely.
I mean, because here's the thing: you don't
right.
Like we know what Trevor Lawrence looked like in college, but there's no guarantee.
No.
How many first overall quarterbacks?
It'd be hilarious for Desean Watson to keep whining about what the situation is in Houston and then wind up on or even worse, he winds up on the Jets.
But do you make that if you're Jacksonville? Do you make that deal because it's within the division? If you're Houston, do you make?
I don't see how you can't. You get Desean Watson and then you just get the best available 2 picks later. Desean Watson is at least he's not that much older.
Jake says you do it.
Jake says do it. I'm with Jake.
Dave, would you? I mean, well, if you're Jacksonville, you do it. But if you're Houston,
Houston, do you make
that call within your division, or are you calling the Jets at 2? I think you're more likely to call the Jets at 2 first, and then if they don't do it, then maybe you make that call. 1. But Dave,
I think it depends on how strained the relationships are in Houston, and I mean, there's only probably a dozen people that truly know how bad they are between them. But if you're going to have Watson sitting all year, and you can move him at the 1 pick, you know what I mean? You got to make the move, even if it's in the division. I mean, it's going to bite you in the ass twice a year. But
and it obviously plays into what they think of Trevor Lawrence as well, because that's presumably who you're going up to get.
Sure.
Just better pick up Troy Polamalu's Head and Shoulders commercials.
Yeah, seriously. But I mean, I think even worse so than the reports of Wilson in Seattle. The reports of Watson in Houston just seem like there's no reconciliation possible.
Well, and I feel like strangely it's very similar tales. Houston's is just far worse. They're both just frustrations with the organization as a whole in what they've managed to build around that player. Saying like, I'm your guy, or, you're my QB, and then be like, but you're going to have to do it by yourself. Right. Like it's not going to be, and Deshaun's is even worse because it's like, oh, yeah, by the way, we just sent your best weapon to Carolina for a washed-up running back and a ham sandwich. So, good luck out there.
But was it a good ham sandwich? Because
it was a ham sub. It was a 12-inch.
Yeah, because I mean, we've had ham sandwiches where it's like, piece of ham, squirt of mustard, and dried cheese. That's no good. But if it's a good ham sandwich, I was
trying to run because that came up on sports radio here. Like that specific trade, they were making fun of it still, like a year later, and it's like, don't get me wrong. I mean, David Johnson played a full year, looked better than I thought he would. How long's he going to do that for? I don't know. And you're going to probably just bring a running back in to run with him anyway.
And it's not a running
but
back
like
league.
DeAndre Hopkins, has there been I was trying to come up with a dumber move. Like was there a move that was made in my lifetime that I remember that was as dumb as that move? And I'm having trouble.
I think they just. I think there was some ink that signed on a $160 million contract that was equally dumb.
Yeah,
maybe.
I mean, I can't. I still can't, especially when it's not a running back.
I mean, in
anymore.
hindsight, the Herschel Walker trade is pretty bad.
Well, sure.
That's an awful. Like you gave a team the pieces to build a dynasty, and in return, you got your washed up running back.
But in the same time, the Dallas Cowboys
Herschel still played pretty well for them for a couple of years.
Yeah, the Cowboys, and here's the thing too about that is though the Cowboys took the 5 picks, or like the 5 players or whatever they got for Herschel Walker, and they turned that into like numerous draft picks and different and nobody saw that coming because back
they made like a bunch of moves to like expand that and
just
rebuild the entire franchise.
And because nobody back then traded draft picks and things like that the way that the Cowboys did. Like for as bad as Jerry Jones is now, what he and Jimmy Johnson did back then with those deals really kind of changed the NFL in terms of trading picks. Huddle Up Podcast is sponsored by Arena Eats. Log on to the website arenaeats.app, that's arenaeats.app, for the ultimate fan experience. At your favorite sports venue, Arena Eats mobile app, pre-order, express pickup, and in-seat delivery. How do you place your order?
I guess the better question, because obviously the Cowboys did well with that, and it's a very different maneuver. I guess the only question would be, do you remember a time where a team moved a player of DeAndre Hopkins' caliber for that little? I mean, you're talking about a guy that in, whether it's every circle or not, in plenty of circles, he was circled as the number 1 quarterback or wide receiver in the NFL.
Yeah, I don't.
There's a few that you could argue are better here in like different circles. What are going to disagree. But at certain aspects of his game, point of the catch at least, he's the best in the league. Still is.
Didn't the Raiders didn't the Raiders give two picks for Antonio Brown a couple years ago? Again, different caliber, but
although the Raiders come up because when Gruden took over, they did ship Khalil Mack for a bag of nickels.
Oh, that one.
They shipped off Khalil Mack for like nothing.
That's true. He hasn't been overly effective overly effective in Chicago though. And maybe
the Chicago defense is. I wouldn't want to play him on any given Sunday.
True.
It's a defense good enough to make Mitch Trubisky a winning quarterback at least every third start. That's pretty impressive.
Well, that's
what about
true.
the trade up? What about the trade up for Mitch Trubisky? There's a bad trade. I mean,
that's a rough one
again, but
a little different. Yeah, a little different.
That's the thing. I don't know if you have anybody that
I'm with Jake. Khalil proves every game that was a bad trade. Khalil Mack is in people's faces. He covers well. He's everywhere the ball is. Like he's like having Bo Jackson from Tecmo Super Bowl playing linebacker for your team.
And like here's the thing is like I just don't know if anybody, at least in recent memory, of DeAndre Hopkins' caliber has been moved by their team. Like
that's because most teams are like, please God,
don't trade this guy. Because I think about like when the Raiders like traded Amari Cooper to the Cowboys for a 1st-round pick. Like that was a sizable move, but Amari Cooper is not on the level of DeAndre Hopkins. So like it was a big move, but it's not like earth shattering like when you move a guy like DeAndre
especially
Hopkins.
After you've moved Khalil Mack.
Right. At that point, it's a yard sale, 2 p.m. on a Saturday. You're just hoping to not move stuff back into your garage. At that point, you come and buy it. I don't want to move it anymore. Like come and get it.
That's just a situation. But as far as the Desean Watson situation, it sounds bad. I think they're definitely looking at all suitors. because it'd be different if they had like a middle of the road pick. It'd be a no brainer. Like try to trade up into the top 5 and get your replacement. But I don't know if they're going to be able to. You should end up with an opportunity to replace him even at 3. I mean, only 2 quarterbacks can come off the board ahead of you at most. And they probably will. It's probably going to be Trevor and the kid from BYU is most likely who's going to be gone because I think the Jets are really high on him. That's my prediction anyway, is that's where he ends up. Although I feel like the Jets need to get flashier. You know, Fields is there. Go flashy.
I was just saying, there's part of me thinks that Fields is going to move.
QB to the Jets.
I also think that's a mistake, but
you tried safe, pure, all by the book football. You tried that a couple of times in New York, and it hasn't worked out.
It's not, no, certainly.
Of course, they tried flashy. They thought Sanchez was flashy. They were wrong.
Hey, but they got a butt fumble out of that, so.
They did get a butt fumble out of it. That's something none of us have.
Last piece of business in the NFL. J.J. Watt signing with the Arizona Cardinals, and I love the way he did it too, because whenever you see these things, who's this? Is it Albert Breer? Is it Schefter? Is it Rap Sheet? Watt posts a picture of himself in a Cardinals shirt, and it just says "Source me." So J.J. Watt, Arizona Cardinals, signs a 2-year deal. It was worth $28 million, 23 guaranteed.
Skosh high, but we expected that.
Skosh high, but and the report is he wanted to go there because of Kyler Murray and what that team's doing on the offensive side of the ball, and of course you have J.J. Watt and Chandler Jones on the same defensive line is not something I want to see very often if I'm an opposing quarterback. I saw a lot of people panning this signing, and Dave, we'll get your thoughts first on this, and we'll go to Sean, because they're saying that why would he go to a team that has no chance of making a run at the Super Bowl? And I'm not entirely sure that that's accurate. Now, are the Cardinals the best team in the league? Absolutely not. But I think they're to me they're better than a lot of people give them credit for. They were an 8-8 team that could have been better. They lost a lot of close games. And you have a young quarterback, a young offense, a young coach. They're learning all the time. In 2 years, are they going to win a Super Bowl guaranteed? No. However, look at the NFL. I don't think there's a lot of teams that you can say, guarantee this team is going to win a Super Bowl. Kansas City is probably a team that you could almost guarantee is a Super Bowl team. Tampa Bay, at least next season, is probably a team that you can look at and say, this team's primed to go and make a run back at it. Green Bay, maybe in the conversation. I don't know. There's a lot more teams that you're in that. Yeah, they're definitely in the conversation. So I like the Cardinals. I think they're a team on the big upswing. Dave, your thoughts? J.J. Watt, 2-year deal to the Cardinals.
Yeah, it's a really good signing for Arizona. Really, really happy to see Arizona get someone big like this, and I really think, echoing a lot of what you said there, I really think it puts them maybe in the front runner for the NFC West now. I mean, we've documented the issues in Seattle. You got to talk about the quarterback in Los Angeles now, and I mean, it all depends on San Francisco's health on a lot of those things. But the NFC West might be the best division in football, the deepest division, and it also might be the most wide open division. Kind of a weird combination that we have in the NFC West. But the Cardinals were, and I don't remember what the exact record were, but they were like 7-2, 7-3, something to start out. And then Kyler had those knee injuries, and he was pretty much limited in mobility the second third or the last third of the year, maybe it was. But you look at that outside of that, and this Cardinals team is competitive and a lot and pretty under the radar competitive in the market that they're in. I'm not a huge fan of their coach, to be honest, but I think that they have a lot of potential with the players that they have, and it's so early on in Kingsbury's coaching career, but. I think that locking up Watt and going on that D line there, I think that this could give some quarterbacks some fits in that not only division but the whole conference. And the other piece is, I believe they finished third last year, which also gives them an easier schedule, which is something to look at. So I really like this. Really like this signing for Arizona, and I think that it elevates them. And again, a defensive player is not going to make a difference here or there, but I really think that leadership and things along those lines, it's going to help add to what Arizona's cooking here.
Yeah, I mean they were 8-8. They were one spot out of the playoffs. The only reason that they missed it and the Bears got in was the Bears won the tiebreaker game, the head-to-head against Arizona. So they were right there. They were right on the cusp of getting in. Would they have beaten the Saints? I don't know, probably not. But the Saints didn't look great in that game against the Bears. So you kind of wonder if the Cardinals got in, could they have beaten them? And I by all means, I don't think they would have made a run to the Super Bowl, but because then they would have had to play Green Bay. But they're a team that's close, and they were a point differential of plus 41, so they were in close games. You go 500. That's a team that a year from now you add another bit of experience and a monster of a D lineman like Jake says here in the comments. Maybe you win 2 or 3 more of those games you lost, and then you become a 10-win team, an 11-win team. If Russell Wilson's not in Seattle, if Matthew Stafford doesn't work out in Los Angeles, if Garoppolo doesn't get his mojo back and it doesn't work out for San Francisco, all of a sudden Arizona could be the best team in what right now looks to be one of the tougher divisions in football. So I think they're right there. Sean, your thoughts on J.J. Watt signing this 2-year deal?
I mean, the Cardinals, you have normally you get that tiebreaker loss, and it's a hard pill to swallow. But when your tiebreaker is you lost head-to-head to the Bears, there's not really much you can say. You're like, well, guys, we lost to the Bears. I don't know what to tell you. Uh-oh. Shouldn't have lost to the Bears. Old Mitch got us. Nick got us. Whoever, I don't even know who played when they played.
I think it was Mitch.
I think it was Mitch. But I think there's some interesting things. I mean, you guys are obviously touching on J.J. Watt bringing a lot to the team, and I don't disagree with that. I think J.J. Watt brings a lot to your defensive line. I just think more of it is in kind of the realm of leadership, I guess, and being kind of that defensive voice. It is a decent situation for him to walk into because Arizona didn't have a bad pass rush to begin with, and they are a team that likes to rotate guys in, and to me, that's what Watt was looking for, and I feel like that's the situation that they should have Watt in. I don't think he's a guy you should have on the field every down, and I don't think he's, if a game's out of hand one way or the other, I don't know that I'd have him on the field much at that point, because I think the second half of Jake's monster D lineman comment is for 8 games. Kind of hinting at the fact that there's a chance he doesn't make it through a full 16 anyway.
Sure.
But you're right. When you talk about the NFC West, I would agree that they might be the most stacked division. I would argue, though, Dave, that the NFC East is equally as wide open. Just throwing that out there. It's not quite the talent pool that the NFC West is, but anybody's ballgame, as far as I'm concerned, in that NFC East. Just throwing that out there.
Whatever you got to tell yourself, Eagles fan.
And if you were asking, would I have thought the Cardinals stood a better chance of beating the Saints than the Bears? I'd have said absolutely. I think the Cardinals at times last year looked brilliant, and at times Kyler Murray looked brilliant. And anytime you can heave the ball downfield to DeAndre Hopkins and have him just snag a win for you, you have a chance to beat anybody. Alleviates pressure on a guy who I'm pretty sure led the league in sacks. Yeah, it was. If he didn't, he was close.
Right.
So you kind of have that monster pass rush. You have a pretty darn good secondary in Arizona. And, like you said, short of Matt Stafford in Los Angeles, who is a major upgrade still, in my opinion, to Jared Goff. And, Lord knows what's going to happen in the state of Washington at this point. So, we could be looking at kind of a strange, it could go from being a Seattle-San Francisco battle to a, LA Arizona battle, which would be very interesting.
Yeah, because I mean, we talked 2 weeks ago,
but I don't think that's because they got J.J. Watt. I think it's because they were already a pretty good team. I would have liked to see him spend some of that money on the offensive side of the line of scrimmage. I felt like, asking Kyler Murray to kind of do all the things that are those two quarterbacks we talked about earlier that won out. You don't want Kyler Murray to wind up in that same situation. So that's what I think is their next step. But yeah, not a bad signing. Just felt a little overpriced for me, but I guess that's the market these days on those big name players.
Yeah, I do love how he apparently had ordered shirts for the 5 teams that he had it boiled down to. It was like Buffalo, Arizona. I'm not sure the other 3. But he actually,
I would imagine Pittsburgh was on that list.
I would think so, especially with his
brother there. And the fact that, again, he wouldn't have had to play every down. And, you're kind of, whether you believe in Ben or not, the Steelers at least give you a chance to get there. It's probably the reason Philly just missed out on that top 5.
Oh, sure. And I mean, he had, not only did he order the 5 shirts, but he had a friend of his actually purchased them and shipped to his friend's house because he was afraid that it was going to get out that he had bought these and where they were going. So he was very extra covert to make sure that the news didn't get out. But of course, signing with Arizona. Huddle Up Podcast is sponsored by Arena Eats. Log on to the website arenaeats.app, that's arenaeats.app, for the ultimate fan experience. At your favorite sports venue, Arena Eats mobile app, pre-order, express pickup, and in-seat delivery. How do you place your order?